In the previous video, I talked about how critical it was to assess what the level of trust is that people have in you as a leader and in your intentions before you make that invitation to sort of radically overhaul the management practice of the organization. Now, so there might be sort of a phase before you actually get going where you want to try to build that trust. Now, I believe the same thing happens sort of internally. You know, this question of your own maturity, the trust that you have in yourself, you know, to be sort of the leader for that transformation. I think it's a fascinating question. You know, to what degree do you trust yourself in that transformation, right? What parts of you are already completely there, already completely ready for, you know, this whole new world that you're inviting people to, and what parts of you maybe aren't there yet. You know, and I think it's really interesting to have a compassionate, non-judgmental look at that. You know, maybe part of the motivation for you to do this is simply because this feels sexy, or this is new, or because you think you will be liked as a leader, or because there's some motivation problem that you're trying to fix. And you know, as I talked about in the very first video, I believe these are insufficient motivations to go very far. Like, it has to be anchored more deeply. Or maybe something is anchored deeply, but still, like, you feel, you know, if things really get tough, I'd want to exert control in the old way. Like, you know, I'm not fully trusting this new thing yet, and that's okay, right? But it's great to have clarity around that. And I'm really struck by, there's one organization, I've mentioned this organization before. They're called Tuscan, and they're doing a wonderful job as sort of coaches and facilitators, as accompagnateurs with organizations who go in this direction in France. And it happens quite often that leaders call them and say, hey, you know, we're ready to go. And then in conversation, people at Tuscan say to the CEO, well, you know, let's wait. Let's have a few conversations, because there's something that feels that you're not quite there yet. And so they're really having these profound conversations until they feel that something has shifted. You know, they call it la bascule, has shifted in the leader, until that they're really anchored in a different, you know, posture. And from that place, then, you know, the invitation can come over very powerfully. And so, you know, if there's parts of you that feel that you also need a little bit of maturation, not just, you know, other people that need to learn to trust you, but you also need a little bit of time to get there. You know, what can you do? Obviously, one is to work with, you know, a coach or somebody who can really, you know, create a space for these deeper conversations. Another way that another piece of advice I'd have for you is to simply, you know, start sharing things from that perspective with people in the organization. You know, start testing your message. You know, whenever something shows up, you know, whenever you hear senior people in the organization looking down on people lower in the pyramid, sort of speak up and explain why from that perspective that is, you know, hurtful or even unacceptable to you. Or when people make decisions without drawing in, you know, the people that should give advice, you know, tell them that, even if you've never introduced the advice process. You know, maybe you can challenge people to make decisions themselves rather than bring it to you. Maybe you can start sharing your perspective, how, you know, it feels awkward to you that, you know, if 98% of the people in the organization are trustworthy, you're creating all these policies for the other 2%. And, you know, and just by sharing these things, just by testing them, you will see how strong they feel. You'll see that in the reaction of other people. You'll see it in yourself. Like, you know, how easy does it feel to share these messages? And by actually sharing them, you're anchoring things in yourself. You know, you're bringing in them more deeply. And so that is, I think, a very simple but powerful piece of advice, is just start sharing things from that perspective. Just start testing the message and see how it lands. And at some point, you'll feel, you know, it's strong enough for you then to, you know, make a much bolder invitation to start the transformation. Maybe a third piece of advice is that you could read a lot about other organizations who've been there. Maybe visit some, but certainly read a lot if you're a reader. There are wonderful books that have been written about some of these organizations. Some of them are listed in the bibliography of Reinventing Organizations. And I have a sense that, once you read 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 stories of other organizations, other leaders who've grappled with the things, that you will grapple with, and who've come out with something really powerful and beautiful, it will give you that much more self-confidence. So anyway, that was my invitation to you, is to check in with yourself. Like, would you trust yourself? Do you feel you're fully ready yet? Of course, you shouldn't wait to be 100% ready, but are you 90% ready to go? And if not, can you mature these things by working with a coach, by going out there and sharing your perspective and message, and by reading more about it?